I think we're set up now. Let's do this. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Money Store. My name is AJ. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for watching. Today, I'd like to share some thoughts on the role of anti-Catholicism in La Luz del Mundo and the consequences of it. Anyone that has spent time in La Luz del Mundo knows that there is an overabundance of sermons regarding Catholics and why their beliefs, their practices, their history, etc., are all erroneous and wrong. Ever since La Luz del Mundo was founded, La Luz del Mundo has had a narrative that they have fed their members about the Catholic Church. This narrative has brought members to hold certain attitudes towards the Catholic Church at large and has unfortunately fed into why La Luz del Mundo members don't investigate the real reasons why Naason Joaquin Garcia was arrested back in June 2019 in Los Angeles. So in this video, I'd like to discuss the deeply intertwined history of La Luz del Mundo and Catholicism, especially in Mexico, and what I exactly mean by anti-Catholicism and the consequences of such things on our present circumstances. But before we begin, let's do some housekeeping. First off, I'd like to note that my absence the past 2-ish weeks was due to me being on a trip, but now I'm back at it. I mentioned that because a few folks inquired and worried that I had for some reason quit the channel, which I most definitely have not. To the contrary, this channel has grown at a pace quicker than I imagined, and I really want to thank you all for that. We have over 200 subscribers now, and I can't wait until we reach 1,000. I'm thinking of doing some sort of special topic or maybe a Q&A for when we hit 500 subscribers, and then later when we hit 1,000. If you have any ideas, let me know. On this channel, I strive to create useful content for you all in your own deprogramming out of La Luz del Mundo and for your efforts to get other people out of the organization. So your engagement is very much appreciated. I appreciate all the messages of support that I've received. Engagement is really important. You can help this channel in convincing YouTube's algorithm that the discussions being had here are appreciated and legitimate through several ways. Liking this video, commenting your thoughts, sharing, and subscribing to this channel are all very helpful and free to do. And then, of course, you can always change your mind later. So let's begin with some church history, because just about all of La Luz del Mundo's history has happened under the shadow of the Catholic Church. La Luz del Mundo was founded in northern Mexico in 1926 by Naason Joaquin. La Luz del Mundo has a whole origin story for themselves, but long story short, Eusebio claimed that on the night of April 6, 1926, he had a vision where God opened the roof of his place of rest, and that God spoke to him directly that night. If it's not that God spoke directly to him that night, then there is some sort of element of God rearranging the stars in the sky to send a message to Eusebio. This is what he claims. So according to Eusebio, God said that he was to change his name to Aaron, and that his name would become known around the world because he was going to be in charge of reestablishing the original Church of Jesus Christ. The claim here from La Luz del Mundo is that the original Church of Christ and the actual means of attaining salvation from God ended way back in the day, around 2 millennia ago, when Jesus was crucified, and then he died, and then subsequently his apostles died off too. According to La Luz del Mundo, since the passing of these folks who were Jesus or close to Jesus, there has been no opportunity for humanity to attain salvation, because in order for such a thing to happen, there needs to be an apostle on earth authorized by God. Such a man is to literally be the middleman between humanity and Jesus and God up in the heavens. This guy is thought of as holding the keys to heaven, and is thought of as being the one which will turn in church members to God once the end times arrive. This is the origin story that La Luz del Mundo tells itself and ritually recounts in order to remind their members of where this whole religious project began. And very stalely, I am going to just describe LLDM as just that, a religious project of Eusebio/Aaron that eventually grew and evolved into what it has become today. Oddly enough, not too much is known about Eusebio in the early formative years of the church, and much less in the life that he lived previously. We do know that he was part of the Mexican military in some capacity, and that following his time serving in the military, he became some sort of tenant farmer, sharecropper, something like that. I'm not too sure what exactly his job was. It has been a while since I've been forced to read the junk of the origin story, but I would like to inquire a lot more into that in the future, given that I hold intense interest in Mexican history. That can be a video project for another day. I need a break right now. So for the record, I will be referring to Eusebio as Eusebio and not as Aron. I respect anyone's like personal decision to go by another name, but given that this is the man that's responsible for starting the religious dogmatism that has poisoned my life and the life of thousands of others, I don't really care to play into his little fantasies of being renamed as a person. I also don't blame Eusebio for not liking his name. It is pretty ugly after all. So the origin story then goes on to claim that Aron reported the spectacular vision to his wife Elisa, who was sleeping next to him, yet didn't get the same vision, and yet she believed him. So from out in northern Mexico, I believe they're like in Monterrey or somewhere nearby, somewhere in northern Mexico, not Guadalajara. So from there, they then make immediate plans to migrate over to Guadalajara because God commanded him and said that the church was to be headquartered over there. Their pilgrimage from northern Mexico down to Guadalajara lasts several months, I believe, and at least some amount of considerable time. And given that the couple was not wealthy, they endured struggles of hunger and slow travel on this pilgrimage down to Guadalajara. I believe they arrived to Guadalajara around the fall or winter of that same year, 1926. And I believe like the exact month is October. Correct me if I'm wrong. So Guadalajara is significant because it is essentially the Catholic capital of Mexico. Any student of history knows that the expansive lands of Mesoamerica have had a deep and complex history with the Catholic faith. Of course, starting back around the turn of the 16th century, when European travelers began establishing contact with the vast amounts of indigenous peoples on this side of the planet, like the Aztecs, the Maya, etc. But by the 20th century, when LLDM is being established, Guadalajara is one of Mexico's most adamantly and covertly Catholic cities. There are tons of cathedrals and sprawling local histories stemming with that faith. So upon arriving to Guadalajara, Eusebio obviously begins to have issues with those local Catholics that he is preaching to. So from its very inception, La Luz Del Mundo has had to try to challenge and eat away at the membership of the Catholic Church in Mexico. Eusebio had no choice but to preach to Catholics in that city. The Catholic Church in Mexico by then had become the dominant religion and was especially vying for political power at the time. 1926 was in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution. And while I won't get into too much detail over the dynamics of that, you should know that the Catholic Church was very much trying to establish itself as the official religion of this burgeoning and redeveloping country. Before we continue, I want to give an important caveat. I absolutely do not doubt that Eusebio endured hardships and persecution for his non-Catholic beliefs in Guadalajara, and even like along the way to Guadalajara. I have no doubt that people chased him out of markets like that of San Juan de Dios in Guadalajara. That's probably the right market. I know I've heard of at least some sort of market in Guadalajara that Eusebio was kicked out of for preaching. It might be that one. There's others, but I have no doubt that people chased him out of markets and probably threw tomatoes and potatoes at him because he was just preaching contrary to the religious status quo. That is really terrible, and I don't really find it unbelievable that such things happened. That same sort of persecution happened in later decades of La Luz Del Mundo's history. Growing up in Houston, I met adult members who in the 1970s have told me that they faced persecution and name calling and whatnot at the hands of non-La Luz Del Mundo people in Guadalajara. Perhaps you have heard of how La Luz Del Mundo members were called Aleluyas back in the day, hallelujahs. They were called that back in the day because they would use that term in church and because they were a religious minority. So back to the history. Eventually, of course, Eusebio comes to establish the neighborhood we now know as the Hermosa Provincia, the beautiful province, in the then outskirts of Guadalajara, starting in the 1950s. In those early years, the church would have some sort of isolation from the grander population of the city. But as Guadalajara expanded in the later half of the 20th century, Hermosa Provincia was further and further integrated into the rest of the city. And in those years of like integration and further sort of contact with this outskirt group of the Hermosa Provincia, I'm sure like La Luz Del Mundo members came more to the attention of Catholics, and I'm very sure that persecution like happened. I really don't doubt it. That's important to admit. But we'll explain a little bit more to that and why that. And we'll in this video, I'm going to explain a little bit more why that sort of early on persecution has fed into the current difficulties we have with La Luz Del Mundo right now. So that's it for today's history lesson. And I want to move on to to what exactly we mean by anti-Catholicism. Not everything that La Luz del Mundo does or says in regard to the Catholic Church is discriminatory, unfair, and toxic in nature. Not everything they do is those things. It is one thing for La Luz del Mundo to give sermons and whatnot, to explain why they think the Catholic Church is wrong in its religious beliefs and practices. But it is another thing to come up with conspiracy theories about the church. Just like the Mormon Church and the Jehovah's Witnesses, et cetera, La Luz del Mundo has plenty to say about why they think the Catholics are theologically wrong. Those sorts of disagreements are totally normal and understandable because that is just how religions work. Religions are in a zero-sum game with each other to garner as many members as they can from each other and to keep them out of the hands of each other. Every member gained in one religion is one that it is kept out of all the others. So in that regard, La Luz del Mundo, trying to convince people to not go to the Catholic Church for theological reasons, and instead to come to them, that's normal behavior for a religious organization, and that's not what I mean by anti-Catholic. However, what is absolutely anti-Catholic about La Luz del Mundo are the varieties of conspiracy thinking and unfair branding that they have for the Catholic Church. La Luz del Mundo very much gives its members the idea that the Catholics are a large worldwide group of vastly mistaken people that God absolutely abhors. LLDM really tries to teach its members that La Luz del Mundo is vastly different from the Catholics because the Catholics are just full of people that follow the religious traditions of their families and the generations before them and the religious traditions of their governments. And so these Catholics, they don't really put much thought into their beliefs. LLDM teaches its members that Catholics are not loved in the eyes of God because they are more liberal in belief and more liberal in behavior, and they have too much of a mishmash of all sorts of beliefs. That is the sort of foundation La Luz del Mundo establishes, but then it starts to become anti-Catholic when they start making up large conspiratorial assumptions about the Catholic Church. What is unfair about how LLDM views the Catholic Church? That is what is unfair about how LLDM views the Catholic Church. When Naason Joaquin Garcia was first arrested back in early June 2019 in Los Angeles, I'm sure that you guys heard plenty of claims that the Catholic Church was the reason behind the false arrest of Naason Joaquin Garcia. The Attorney General of California at the time was Javier Becerra, and many LLDM members in those days of the arrest and many members in the early days of the arrest and even up to the present day love to rant on and on about how Naason Joaquin Garcia is innocent and honorable and is only arrested on such horrific charges because the Catholic Church is trying to get him in trouble because they are jealous of La Luz del Mundo's growth. That's what they say. But let me remind you that the charges that were brought against Naason Joaquin Garcia had to do with the possession of child pornography, human trafficking, sexual abuse of minors, etc. And yet, LLDM said that such charges were put there in order to distract everyone from the deep history of the abuses that have happened under the Catholic faith. La Luz del Mundo is totally right in pointing out that the Catholic Church has had such troubles, but that doesn't mean that the Catholic Church would do such a thing like come up with this grand conspiracy to get the leader of La Luz del Mundo in trouble. This is where the thinking gets conspiratorial and unfair and toxic. I have heard constantly that Naason Joaquin Garcia was only arrested because the Catholic Church was paying off the authorities of California and paying off the people who decided to come forward as anonymous victims. And the conspiratorial thinking didn't stop there. When news broke out in February 2020 that Xochitl Martin was bringing forward a civil suit against many top-ranking members of the church, many LLDM members denounced her as having been paid off by the church in order to bring forward false accusations. And then, of course, when people like myself leave the church, we also get to hear accusations that we are somehow in cahoots with the Catholics, somehow in cahoots with the Vatican. This sort of thinking gets really unfair against Catholics, and it evolves into this conspiratorial thinking, like that which I just described. LLDM tries to make its members believe that Catholics are just brainless puppets who are in that church because of tradition, and that they are all at the whims of the Vatican, which is just pulling their puppet strings. Interestingly, I have even heard talk this past November, right before the presidential election, that some LLDM members weren't going to vote Democrat like they had in previous elections, because Joe Biden was a Catholic, and if elected, he would likely grant a larger job to Javier Becerra, which is what eventually ended up happening. Javier Becerra now serves on Joe Biden's cabinet. I don't remember the exact position, but that's a thing. What LLDM doesn't understand and doesn't want its members to understand is that the Catholic Church is incredibly large, and there are a variety of positions and views within that broad umbrella. Going back to the 2020 election, even Catholics were quite divided on how they voted. Not all voted for Biden, the Catholic. And previously, the only Catholic president that there had been was John F. Kennedy way back in the 60s. So that same sort of variety of thought happens when it comes to the deep history of sexual abuse within the Catholic clergy across the world also. While it is possible for a Catholic to recognize that there have been sexual abuses within the church's networks and that such injustices should be stamped out of their organization, LLDM members can't have such a nuanced position when it comes to their own LLDM church. La Luz del Mundo members are taught to not question at all the authority of the apostle, and that is why, when charges come forward against him, they instantly begin yakking on about every conspiracy theory that they can think of in regards to the Catholic Church. Many Catholics are open to admitting to the flaws within their clergy, but La Luz del Mundo isn't allowed to have such a mental freedom. I know what you're thinking. I'm bound to receive some silly criticism from La Luz del Mundo members for this video. I wouldn't be surprised if someone misconstrued what I'm saying here as being advocacy for the Catholic Church, which it is most definitely not that. I just wish to point out that these factors in La Luz del Mundo members' mind, I just wish to point out that these factors in LLDM's worldview, in order to call attention to how so much of this conspiratorial thinking and echo chambering and hearkening back to the history of the deep history of La Luz del Mundo and the Catholics, all those things, those are all coming into play right now during this situation as a result of the fact that La Luz del Mundo is in its own little cult bubble. It is a cult that viewers of this channel, that viewers of this channel's first video will know that is not as large as it claims it is, and therefore La Luz del Mundo is decidedly not a significant threat at all to the Catholic Church. La Luz del Mundo is incredibly small. There are absolutely not 5 million members worldwide. And again, going back to INEGI, the Mexican census, according to INEGI's most recent census report, which came out in like January, February this year, and it was done last year, less than 200,000 people in Mexico are LLDM. And a quarter of those aren't even adults yet. They're just children. They're just born into it. One of the ways that La Luz del Mundo La Luz del Mundo tries to grow in Latin America is by giving their members a story and explanation for why all the Catholics around them are devastatingly wrong, mistaken, and sinful, while LLDM is exclusively right, is God's underdog, and couldn't possibly be wrong because God is on our side. God is on our side because he hates the Catholics so much. The Catholics for centuries have poisoned religion, have made fun of like Jesus and not preach the correct word, something like that. This is what they tell each other. Much of La Luz del Mundo's drive against the Catholic Church is precisely about throwing stones at big brother Catholics in order to make La Luz del Mundo feel better about themselves and their doctrine and their beliefs, and the fact that they are going against the religious status quo. La Luz del Mundo's competitiveness with the Catholic Church is reflected in how large the church in the Hermosa Provincia is. There's a really interesting article that I read in El País earlier this year, and I'll link it down below. That explains why the church in Hermosa Provincia was built to such a massive height. It was done that height in order to spite the rest of the Catholic cathedrals in Guadalajara and the rest of them in Mexico. And I think that to this day, that big white wedding cake looking church in Hermosa Provincia is still the tallest church in all of Latin America. I could be wrong, but I feel like I've read that in one or two places and somewhere. I don't have an exact link for that, but if someone wants to confirm that, let me know. Another way La Luz del Mundo tries to differentiate itself from Catholics is through the emphasis on the 14th birthday of each of the church's young members. At the age of 14, young members are put through a number of rituals where they are further indoctrinated and are asked if they are going to commit to, and they are asked if they are going to commit continuing going to church. Excuse me. 14-year-olds are presented in front of the church along with their parents, and then they're also baptized, and they are also put through spiritual revivals. These all typically land on different dates around like the age of 14, and some of these things may even need to be done multiple times, like the revivals. One of the reasons these things happen at the age of 14 is as an effort from La Luz del Mundo to differentiate itself from the quinceañeras of Mexicans, the 15th birthdays that Mexicans celebrate. And then, of course, most Mexicans are Catholic. I've heard La Luz del Mundo members claim that these things are done at the age of 14 because by then the LLDM born child isn't a child and can apparently think and decide large life decisions for themselves once they're 14. Additionally, they say that it is better to emphasize that adult level decision at an age younger than the years that others emphasize. So like the age of 15 is emphasized in the quinceañeras, and then La Luz del Mundo members say that it is better to emphasize it at the age of 14. Ironically, while La Luz del Mundo dismisses Catholics as just being Catholic because they were born into it and they don't want to break the tradition of what they were born into, La Luz del Mundo can actually be accused of the exact same thing, and probably even worse. La Luz del Mundo needs so many rituals to happen at the age of 14 because that is how they further indoctrinate people and get them further entrenched in La Luz del Mundo for the rest of their lives. And it's not even just those rituals. There's a lot of other sort of landmarks that happen within a La Luz del Mundo member's life that, again, are meant to like keep them entrenched in the community. La Luz del Mundo criticizes Catholics for baptizing their infants because they believe in original sin. So then La Luz del Mundo decides to baptize people starting at the age of 14 because they think that by then the child can think for themselves and differentiate between good and evil. In fact, La Luz del Mundo teaches that should a child under the age of 14, aka not baptized, die, their salvation is dependent upon the good behavior of their parents. That is some sick and twisted logic to run on. Furthermore, just as the Catholics often have 15th birthday parties for the youth, especially women, almost exclusively women, but especially women, La Luz del Mundo has the pageantry of the 14th birthday and the presentation that happens along with that. That's one of the three sort of rituals at the age of 14. During these presentations, young girls have big elaborate dresses and young boys have very uptight suits that they wear in front of everyone. Then added to all this, La Luz del Mundo has the ritual of the revivals or the avivamientos, which are themselves their own topic of discussion. But I'll say here that they are intentionally traumatizing ordeals with the sick and twisted logic and purpose behind them. So, in conclusion, I believe that is all I have to say today. In this video, I have sought to tackle the subject of the anti-Catholic attitudes of La Luz del Mundo members. I've tried to explain what I mean by anti-Catholicism and how that is different from just normal and expected criticisms of Catholicism that any Catholic church would have, that any non-Catholic church would have. Let me repeat that again. I've tried to explain what I mean by anti-Catholicism and how that is different from just normal and expected criticisms of Catholicism that any non-Catholic church would have. I've also given a bit of LLDM church history and explained why there is such an emphasis on the wrongness of the Catholic Church and LLDM's teachings. And further, I have tried to explain why and how all the anti-Catholic rhetoric from La Luz del Mundo has led many members to believe in conspiracy theories about the Catholics, and which has then further kept members from actually informing themselves through mediums like the Ex-LLDM subreddit and through news outlets like Univision and Milenio. The anti-Catholic rhetoric, poisons the sort of information that's out there, and not only are members told not to go read that stuff and go inform themselves, they're also told that hey, those people are probably paid off by the Catholic Church, or actually they are, and don't even engage in that. This is all really tragic stuff, and I hope this sort of video essay has helped explain this interesting angle of La Luz del Mundo, thought for all you guys. I especially really want to know what you all think. Do you have anything that you would add to this discussion of La Luz del Mundo's relationship to Catholicism and how that has affected the present situation? Have you come across La Luz del Mundo members and their conspiratorial thinking in regards to Catholics? And lastly, have you received your check from the Pope for leaving La Luz del Mundo and talking bad about La Luz del Mundo? Because I haven't received my check from the Pope yet. I'm still waiting on it. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this content, I invite you to engage with it. Like this video, leave a comment down below. I respond to nearly all of them. Share this with your friends and subscribe to the channel. Doing any of these helps this channel convince YouTube's algorithm that the discussions being had here are legitimate and appreciated. And of course, doing any of these is free and you can always change your mind later. Thank you for watching again. Take good care, everyone. We're in solidarity.